end of the year. We have just a couple of more days left in 2025. So I wanted to hop on here and talk a little bit about my personal journey this year and particularly my personal style and just how 2025 was really a transformative year for me in terms of my style um, and the intention that I placed behind my style. I think when I started to think about, posting this video and really talking about this, um, it really came from how I have just learned through so many different things that have happened this year about what it really means to advocate for myself and to show up authentically and to really be the most authentic version of myself for that moment at time, right? And being clear about who I am, as the day goes on, and as certain things pop up in my life, whether that be at work or whether that be personally or whether that be some type of spiritual warfare that I'm going through, just not feeling the pressure to dress everything up. And that's really the essence of this conversation today is dressing up the pain, right? I have always said that I feel like fashion for me has always been something that ran much more deeper than, just putting on clothes. Um, if you follow me, you know my story of being bullied. You know my story of what it was like for me to grow up as a gay boy and having to navigate, what that felt like in a small town. Um, and fashion was a way that I was able to find my voice. It was a way that I was able to have some sort of escape, but it also helped me feel confident, at a time where so many people were saying so many negative and nasty things about me. And it really helped me find my true self. And so, I remember in pre K even arguing with my mom about shoes and crying because she wanted me to wear these god awful ugly sandals. And, even throughout grade school and up into high school, that was a constant, negotiation that we were having. I remember when skinny jeans came out, and I mean, God bless her soul, she was literally like, I do not want you wearing them tight ass jeans. And I was like, but I'm going to wear them because that's what's in style. So, like I said, it's always been something. I've always been creative when it came to my style and my fashion. And I've always, made little out of nothing. I remember not even really having a ton of money and, my mom going into taking us to the mall and being like, okay, you got 150, $200, to get school clothes for the year or for the season. Like, figure it out. And it's crazy to even think about that because these days, $200 for these kids doesn't go anywhere. I think that's maybe like a shirt and jeans if you're lucky, if it's on sale. So, for my nephew, that's one pair of shoes. So, being able to really have the freedom now, financially, or a little bit more financial freedom to really dress the way that I feel and show that full range of Cedric is important to me. And it's been something that I have valued for most of my life. However, with that being said, I think that, when I started to really think about who I was and who I wanted to become and what that looked like for me, what I was beginning to realize was that fashion was a mask. It was a way that I dressed up the pain. It was a way that, I found myself really not being fully authentic at times, because I would be feeling terribly frustrated or upset about something going on in my life, and I would throw on the most fabulous outfit, not because I needed something to make me feel better, but because I felt like that's what was expected of me, right? And I became a little bit too comfortable with dressing up the pain. I became a little bit too comfortable with putting on the facade that everything was okay, even when I wasn't feeling 100% my best. And so when I started to think about what reimagining my style would look like this year, it wasn't anything that was really like monumental, or it wasn't this like big epiphany that I had. I just really felt the need to be in more of a classic, timeless kind of silhouette, if you will. I kind of found a way to kind of have a uniform. You know what I mean? Like, not wearing the same thing every day, but wearing the same types of things that felt comfortable and that felt livable and breathable and didn't make me feel constricted just for the sake of an aesthetic or a look. And I think that became really, really important because it pushed me to really ask myself, who am I doing this for? And do I really enjoy this? You know? And I think when you are going through those really transformative times in your life and you're having to really call into question the things that you do and the habits that you have, whether that be the way you dress or the way you spend money or what you spend money on or the way you talk to people or the way you handle situations, like whatever that is for you. I think when you're forced to really call that into question, it's a very humbling experience because it makes you really go within yourself to really see what is the root cause and or value or intention that you place behind the simplest of things, right? That have really a much bigger impact than even you and I could even think of. So when I began to think about that, right, I did a large upheaval of my closet, which I do a closet clean out every year, but it wasn't just to get rid of things, right? So I could make room for more. It was really about, this just doesn't feel like me. You know, this just doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel authentic to me. This doesn't feel like who I'm becoming anymore. And I need to get rid of it so that I can wear the things that do feel like me, so that I can wear the things that do feel authentic to who I am. And I think that was really important because I think, for me, because being adaptable is one of my strengths, I always kind of found myself being a little bit of a chameleon when it came to fashion. When I was in high school, I was a very preppy dresser, because I wanted to fit in with a certain demographic of students that, I was in honors classes and gifted courses. And so, I was surrounded around a lot of white students. And so I didn't want to be the sore thumb. And so, I found my way of trying to blend in. And it's funny because when you look at pictures of me in high school, it's funny how I interpreted that blending in. I still stuck out like a sore thumb, but in my mind, right, like I was wearing the brands and the colors and the types of silhouettes and trousers and things of that nature that they were wearing, and so in my mind I was fitting in. In college, I think my fashion was very reflective of what I had, which is nothing. I didn't have no damn money. So, it was very like relaxed and laid back unless there was like an actual event or something like that. I couldn't really play with fashion as much as I wanted to in college, but I still had a reputation of being, well dressed, just because, I knew how to make a little out of nothing. And then, when I get into as I think about my adulthood, I think that it was a battle of identity. It was a battle of trying to understand and figure out what makes sense for me. And I think, I came to Atlanta at 22, 23 years old, and Atlanta has a very rich urban streetwear type of fashion culture. Atlanta's very on trend. You know what I mean? Like when you come to Atlanta, you're going to see what's on trend for urban wear, for streetwear, for that kind of sneakerhead, laid back, label heavy type fashion. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that speaks to the culture of Atlanta. And I actually think it's quite cool, although it can be sometimes a little exhausting. I actually think it's kind of cool to see people walking around sometimes looking like the damn mannequin at the Gucci store, and then kind of adding their own flair to it. So, I think coming to Atlanta, it was evident that at 23 years old, I couldn't afford, you know, dressing in Gucci and Louis from head to toe. I was never a Jordans guy. You know, I was never a sneakerhead. You know, and, you know, the thing about being in the gay community was that the gay community, you know, a lot of them were very expressive in their own ways when it came to fashion in Atlanta. And some of them are just simply not fashionable, and no shade, but some it's evident that's, you know, and fashion's not everybody's thing. You know what I mean? Some of them are just simply not fashionable. Some of them are just simply not stylish. They're just not. And that's, like I said, that's no shade, but you know, some of them also too, like really were, and it was interesting to see what that was for them. But nonetheless, I never fit into any of that, and so I think I tried to again fit in with, but still try to find my own flair, and it just created the most confusing wardrobe. I mean, like, when I cleaned out my closet earlier this year, I was like, this shit is confusing. Like, if somebody came in my closet, they wouldn't know who I am, what I do, what, like, there was no synchrony in my style and in my fashion. It was like I had a little bit of everything based upon where I was going or what I was doing. Right. And I think that was, again, that part of me, that insecure part of me who just wanted to fit in. And so when I reimagined my style, right, I went with the things that felt comfortable. And I'll clip some pictures, right? But like, all of these outfits show the comfortability of who I am and the versatility of who I am, whether I'm in like sweats and Timbs or whether I'm like in a Chelsea boot with a, you know, damn near floor length top coat and, you know, a bag. Like, all of those things feel to me effortless, timeless, classic, you know, earthy tones, like not too loud, not too much. And that's how I really, you know, feel depending upon the day. And then putting the emphasis, and then, you know, around the accessories and just how I like to kind of show up and show my flair in that. And so I think that it was important for me to just really find that voice through my fashion. You know, even when I think about who I am and who I've become as a content creator, if you will, it's still very strange to identify myself as that. But even when I think about who I've become as a content creator, my content is not rooted in aesthetics or lifestyle or luxury or anything of that nature. Do I have those things? Yes. Can I create a platform that way? Absolutely. Do I follow people whose platforms are based and rooted in that? Yes, 100%. But that's not authentic to who I am when it comes to the intention that I want to place behind the work and the ministry that I put out into the world. I'm not really concerned with aesthetics or luxury or items as much as I am really concerned about really motivating people to become the best version of themselves. And that's not to say that those content creators who do focus on that aren't doing that, because I do think that there's a place and a role that they play in that. But I know for me, you know, that my voice and my prayers and, you know, my spiritual intelligence and, you know, the candor and the realness and the authenticity that I bring to this camera and to social media platforms just is way more important than trying to, you know, dress up and get in front of the camera and then give the message. Sometimes I'm in sweats. Sometimes I got a bonnet on my head when God drops something on my spirit, and I want to honor what God is putting in me in that given time without feeling like I got to go dress up to get on camera to do it. And so, yeah, I think, you know, I would love to really, you know, just hear about how, you know, you guys identify with fashion or with your own personal style. And I even think that there's so much beauty in those people who don't really put a ton of effort into it, because even that becomes, stylish, and fashionable, especially as we're moving into this like 90s effortless, minimalistic type, vibe, where people are just kind of throwing on relaxed jeans, boot cut jeans, oversized shirts, jerseys, throwing on a ball cap with a white tee and a flip flop. Like, that's so cool to me to be able to see how we've like removed the maximalism from everyday fashion to just being kind of clean and sleek and timeless. And that's what I really identify with as well. So, yeah, this is just, one of the 2025 wrapped conversations that I wanted to have. I'm going to have probably about one or two or more of these to just kind of talk about my overall growth of 2025. So be sure to tune in and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe. If you are someone who follows me on Instagram or TikTok, I want to personally thank you so much for all of the support, all of the DMs, all of the light, and just the positivity that you guys are, really sharing with me. For those of you who have, bared your soul and been vulnerable enough to share your testimonies with me, know that I do not take it lightly. I'm so glad that God has used me as a vessel to be a light in your life. And I hope that for all the days that I'm on the earth, that I continue to be able to be that. This has been a beautiful journey of growing this platform, and it's still growing. You know what I mean? I'm at just a little bit over 28,000 followers on TikTok. I've gotten a couple of 100 new followers on Instagram. I haven't quite reached 5,000 followers on Instagram yet, but I don't play the aesthetics game, so it's a little bit of a longer game for me. And yeah, I'm just grateful. Thank you all for those who have subscribed on YouTube and, who have been supportive. I am just every day humbled by all of you who have seen something in a little old black gay boy from Thompson, Georgia. So still becoming, still standing, always loving. I'll talk to you guys later.